Welcome to a horribly nerdy podcast, the podcast that's so bad, horrible is in its name. I'm your host, Chris, and on this podcast we talk about movies, comic books, video games, paranormal, and much more. And today we're going to be diving into the movie Psycho Goreman. What happens when a bratty young girl ends up with the power to control an alien warlord? Well, let's find out in Psycho Goreman.
Many moons ago, a nameless evil was imprisoned in a place far beyond reach.
Hurry up!
If he were ever to be released, it would spell certain doom for all existence.
Is that fear I smell? Your planet will be torn to pieces, and I will
Mimi,
treat your
look!
angry screams as I rip.
Is this yours?
Oh,
Speak?
Oh my god.
the gem of Paraxidike. Whoever wields it is able to command me.
Go over there and wait for us to come back in the morning.
You will suffer an eternity for this.
Mom, Dad, I want you to meet Psycho Goreman, or PG for short.
I will bathe in your blood.
Don't worry.
Be worried. Slow down!
He's gonna kill everybody.
Not unless I tell him to.
What did you three maniacs get up to?
This is getting a little weird.
This sick game must come to an end. She will enslave the galaxy into endless servitude. Kill him!
Cool.
The ultimate evil has awoken.
There's a new god in town, and his name? Psycho Goreman. It was nice meeting you.
It would be nicer if you were dead.
All right, bye.
Psycho Goreman is a 2021 Shudder release. Psycho Goreman was originally scheduled to premiere at the South by Southwest Film Festival, but due to COVID, of course, it was canceled. But it was released exclusively by Shudder Films on January 22nd, 2021. And I will admit, like, the first time I watched the trailer, I was like, oh man, this looks awesome. And then I put it off for some reason. And then the second time I watched the trailer, I was like, oh, this looks really low budget. I don't know if I'm gonna like this. And then I watched the trailer a third time, like a few months later, and I was like, holy crap, what's wrong with me? This movie looks awesome. So definitely the thing about horror is it depends upon your mood, what you enjoy and not enjoy. And I realize now I have to go and rewatch some films that I kind of bashed and poo-pooed and see if maybe, depending upon my mood, how I feel about the film. But anyways, I finally watched the film, and I'm kicking myself in the butt for not watching it so much sooner, because this was a fun movie. Let's break down the plot a little bit. So basically, siblings Mimi and Luke discover a strange, glowing gem while digging in their garden. That night, an alien overlord emerges from the hole. He enters an old shoe factory and brutally kills a group of thieves hiding out there. The next day, they follow the trail of carnage to the shoe factory and discover the monster. The monster identifies himself as the Archduke of Nightmares, a deadly alien warrior imprisoned on Earth after attempting to destroy the galaxy in a rampage. But before he can kill them, he realizes young Mimi has the gem, which allows her to command him. And she decides, well, we're not going to call you the Archduke of Nightmares. We're going to call you, Psycho Goreman, or PG for short, and begins commanding PG around despite Luke's concerns. Now, the interesting dynamic between Mimi and Luke. I believe Mimi is the younger sister of Luke, but yet she's very demanding and controlling. Like when we first very much open the film, they're playing a game of Crazy Ball. It's a game they invented. And of course, Mimi wins and she decides on the punishment, which is she's going to bury her brother alive and makes him dig his own grave, which is how they end up finding this gem. So yeah, it's this kind of dynamic between the two of them does play out in the film rather interestingly. PG tells the children he was a slave to the Templars, Pandora's religious order on his home planet Gygax, until he discovered that gem which bonded with him, giving immense power to him. So he assembled an army called the Paladins of Obsidian and battled the Templars and began a rampage across the galaxy until the Planetary Alliance defeated him and imprisoned him on Earth. So, yeah, it's very interesting. So he starts out as an alien slave. There's these weird, the Templars, which is this strange alien religious order. They look like cyborg aliens, basically.
Hey, Future Chris here. Upon playing this back, I realized I said cyborg aliens when I meant to say cyborg angels. So anytime I refer to the Templars and I mention aliens, I mean angels. Sorry about that.
It's very, I don't know if this is, if the filmmakers were going for like a whole good versus evil thing, because if they were, good does definitely not triumph in this film. But yeah, it was very interesting to see the designs, and it's all practical effects. There's barely any CGI, and if it is, it's just to kind of enhance a few things. So it's all practical, which I freaking is from the past, as you heard on the podcast. I love practical effects. I'm all about it. So the kids leave him be at the shoe factory for a bit, and then they come back to give him food and magazines, apologizing for not having any porn, but pointing out that at least there are hunky boys. PG denies being interested in hunky boys, but after he skims through the magazine, maybe he likes hunky boys. And this comes into play later in the film.
We brought you some reading material, PG. And TV to watch. Did you sleep okay? I'm sorry we didn't bring any pornos.
Petty displays of wealth. How can your short lifespans allow such narcissism?
Yeah, but look at all the hunky boys.
I do not care for hunky boys. Or do I?
Mimi and Luke's parents, Susan and Greg, see PG, and Mimi introduces him, showing how she can control him. And of course, he keeps saying he's going to kill them, and she's like, he's not going to kill you. He's like, I will crush you, I will destroy you. She's like, he's not going to do that. And so she obviously has this power. She's very demanding. Mimi has a huge crush on Luke's friend, whose name I can't remember, but he has no interest in her whatsoever, so she demands PG to do something about it, and Psycho Gorman turns him into this weird brain-walking creature, like a giant brain-looking thing. It's really weird, and the poor kid never goes back to normal. He's just stuck in there, but it's just a funny side of the film. And of course, it's showing off more of the great practical effects. While Luke and Mimi are playing with PG, they decide to teach him the rules of Crazy Ball, which I'm not going to get into because holy crap, there's so many rules and it's so ridiculous. The group is approached by two police officers, even though PG is wearing a disguise that makes him look exactly like Dr. Alan Grant from Jurassic Park. But you can't fool these cops. One shoots at him, and PG mutates him into a deformed, melted, zombie-like slave. who all he wants to do is just die. He keeps referring to this throughout the film. So, while PG is back at the shoe factory, they bring him a television, and he somehow is able to contact his paladins of Obsidian and tell them to come rescue him. So shortly thereafter, they're playing in the woods, and they've got the mutated zombie cop thing with them, and the paladin of Obsidian arrive. And he orders them to kill Mimi and Luke, to which they just laugh at him in his face and have let him know that they are now allied with the Templars. PG ends up injured by them when Mimi keeps him from fighting back until he apologizes to her for trying to kill them. And he really gets his ass kicked for a while, but then, of course, he apologizes and he goes full psycho on them, and blood and ripped body parts and all kinds of craziness ensues. Finally, the Templars bring their greatest warrior to defeat him, and in a showdown at the shoe factory, Psycho Gorman decides to have one contest. He kind of asks for a parlay, and he, as you know, I guess there's some kind of rules where the warrior is granted, or a prisoner or something is granted one kind of strange contest or something. I'm not exactly sure how they refer to it, but he lets Mimi choose, and what does she choose? Of course, well, Crazy Ball. So they have a Crazy Ball showdown, during which Psycho Gorman's Hunky Boy magazine ends up destroyed, and he is devastated by this. And it ends up, I believe he gets injured during this, and he's dying, and somehow, even though they end up winning the round of Crazy Ball, the Templar warrior decides, nope, I don't care. I'm going to kill you anyways. So she brings out her giant sword, and then PG says, okay, well, I'm going to create my own sword, and starts ripping pieces off of her and creating and kind of building them into a sword. During the battle, Mimi has been corrupted by the power of the gem, and she wants Luke to die. And Luke finally convinces her, like, hey, the power of that gem has corrupted you, and you're treating me like shit, and we're supposed to be family and love each other. And PG kind of overhears this word love, and he wonders, what is love? And they tell him the affection between the two, and Mimi realizes her mistakes, and her and Luke reconcile. And after PG defeats Pandora, he now no longer needs the gem, which he gives as a souvenir to Mimi, because he is now powered by love, and he will use that love to destroy the galaxy. But because he has grown fond of Mimi and her family, he decides to spare them. And he goes on to teleport to a different city and just starts destroying and devastating the Earth, and ends up in kind of a giant kaiju form at the very end, and that's kind of where we end the film. Now, that's a very simplified plot. Honestly, this movie took me by surprise. I was not expecting it to be this much fun. The gore effects are absolutely thrilling. The practical effects are amazing. I mean, it's definitely like a huge throwback to the 80s crazy monster move that they had and all that, and it's definitely worth a watch for the practical effects alone. I absolutely loved this film. The critical response, it actually holds an approval rating of 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, with an average of 7.2 out of 10 at other sites, and which is awesome, because It's just an absolute fun movie. It's a blast to watch, and I really enjoyed the film. I highly recommend it. Even though, yeah, I did a lot of spoilers here, it's still worth delving into and watching. It's a ton of fun. I mean, you cannot go wrong with this film. Whether you're a practical effects lover, you're a gore lover, or you just want to watch a fun horror movie. And it's been a long time since I've just sat down and watched some crazy, absolute blast of a horror film. And this really, it ticked all the boxes. It blew me away. It was 100% worth it. I highly recommend Psycho Goreman. Please watch it. I give it 4 Templars out of 5. Definitely check it out. Some of my favorite kills from this, besides the mutated cop, he is able to like extend his face and devour enemies, and it ends up looking and sounding so gross. It's so weird. And when he first gets at the shoe factory, he is almost assaulted and mugged by 3 individuals, and he rips 2 of their heads off, and the third one doesn't want to die, so he ends up like freezing him and all, like almost like a carbonite type thing, but I don't know, it's so weird. He's like a liquid nitrogen carbonite thing, but he's able to have consciousness and everything. And when Luke and Mimi find Psycho Goreman at the shoe factory, Luke accidentally bumps into the frozen dude, and he shatters into a million pieces. And it's such a great effect, and there's blood everywhere, and it was really freaking cool. And and I'm not going to spoil all of the really cool gory parts, because it's worth a watch for those scenes alone. The acting is pretty decent. I mean, they're all relatively unknowns. Mimi is the one that I think is like the standout star here. She does a great job of just being a fucking brat. And I mean, you really, at first you're kind of like, okay, she's cute and all that. I'm going to kind of be with her. And then as she kind of, I don't know if she gets more corrupted, or the more and more you're like, oh, this little bitch, man, she drives me nuts. And you're really pulling for Luke, and you're siding with Luke, and you're deciding for Psycho Goreman to just absolutely destroy her. But in the end, she kind of redeems herself, and it all works out. And so she is definitely the standout star. Luke does a good job of like being beaten down, kind of not that necessarily feeling of betrayal, but just of being just knocked around, down and depressed. He does a great job with that. And the man that does the voice for Psycho Goreman is fantastic. I don't recognize him in anything, and I don't have his name in front of me, unfortunately. But I loved his voice. It reminds me of, of course, like the greats, like Doug Bradley as Pinhead and stuff like that. But he just has that deep, commanding voice, and it's definitely interesting. So yeah, I highly recommend Psycho Goreman. Check it out. Our video game for the week is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. We're going to be talking about Onimusha Warlords. Onimusha Warlords was released for PlayStation 2 in 2001. Of course, there was a remaster and released on PlayStation 4 in 2019, and I do own it, but I have yet to play it. So, of course, this review is going to be for the original PS2 version, which is one of my favorite games of all time. I love the Onimusha series. Well, the first 3. The 4th game, I haven't really played, but I tried to watch a Let's Play on it, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. I kind of lost interest after about an hour. So, the first 3 games, I think, are phenomenal. The second one is okay, but then they blew it out of the water with the third one, Demon Siege, and we will eventually cover those 2. I'll probably be honest, I'll probably cover Onimusha 2 next week, and then Onimusha 3 the week after that. But anyways, so it is a hack and slash style adventure action game in which you play the samurai Samanosuke Akechi, who fights against the forces of Nobunaga Oda. After his death in battle, after Nobunaga's death in battle, Samanosuke goes on a quest to save Princess Yuki from the demons, or Genma, as they call themselves in the game, working alongside Nobunaga's forces. So you control Samanosuke and his partner, a female ninja named Katie. Katie, I can't remember how to say her name. Kade or Katie, or it's really, I'm not good with other cultures' names. I apologize. It does borrow a lot of elements from Capcom's Resident Evil series, but it does focus much more on the action style. The original gameplay, it balances action elements, and there are some puzzles that involve interacting with the environment. Like there is one point where Samanosuke is locked in a small room and it's filling up with water, and you have to play his partner, Katie. I'm just going to call her Katie because I don't know how to say her name. But you have to figure out how to put these puzzles in just the right order in order to save Samanosuke. It took me forever to figure out how to do that. I think I killed Samanosuke about 17 times before I finally got it. You start with a standard katana sword, and you can obtain long-range weapons with a very limited supply. But as you progress, you end up kind of, in a way, joining forces with the Oni. And they give you this gauntlet that allows you to absorb the souls of your enemies, which are used to pretty much as currency in the game. They're used to recover soul, or upgrade weaponry, which are the red souls. Yellow souls will recover health, and blue souls recover magic powers. You end up gaining 3 elemental weapons: the Ryzen, the Enryu, and the Shippu, and they all have their own elemental magic. My favorite was the double-bladed... Oh, what was that? Was that the Shippu? I believe it's the Shippu, which I think is the 3rd weapon you get. And it's this double-bladed long staff sort of thing. And that was my favorite weapon. Unfortunately, so you get the Ryzen sword, which allows you to control lightning. You can use lightning forced attacks. The Enryu was that, I believe that was an axe, and you could use earth type attacks. And the Shippu was this green double-bladed long staff which controlled wind, and you would have like this huge range attack. But the problem was, so the Enryu is like your heavy weapon, but it's very slow. Yes, it does a lot of damage, but it's very slow. The Ryzen does medium amount of damage. It is a fast, but the Shippu does probably the lightest damage, but you can inflict more hits. And I found myself liking the Shippu even that much more, because I was able to get hit less because of its long-ranged attack, and get more hits on an enemy, which would kill them faster. There, like I said, there were some points where you play as Katie, and she has her own distinctive weapons and acrobatic abilities, but she is unable to absorb souls. But I believe they do give her a necklace at some point, which allows her to, and then she just gives the souls to Samanosuke in the end. This was an absolute blast of a game. I've played it dozens of times. The controls, as the games progressed, 2 had better controls. 3, I think, had the best controls. This one, the controls were iffy. It's really, it's over the shoulder, third person perspective. But I think the biggest problem was, so anytime you turned around, the camera would follow you and turn around right there. So it just got super annoying. but I mean, as I played for the very first time I played it, I didn't mind because I didn't know that the controls were any better for the second and third game. But it does have some clunky controls, which I heard the remaster has kind of improved upon. There are quite a bit of boss battles. They do get repetitive at one point, but what I and what an Onimusha is basically, once you have well, especially in the second and third games, they let you do this, but you're supposed to collect all these souls, and in the end, you gain the power and turn into the Onimusha, which is like this super powered warrior with magic powers and everything, and you're able to defeat the demon lord Fortinbras. And so, spoilers for Onimusha, the very first game. You don't get to play as the Onimusha at all. What you basically do is when you go and face Fortinbras for the last time, once you defeat him, you go into this cutscene where you become the Onimusha, and he fights the Fortinbras, and he finally kills the Fortinbras, and he rescues the princess and all that. But they did improve upon the second and third. When you collect so many souls, you can use that power and fight the Genma and all that. And it has its flaws, but it is a fun game. It leads to, sequels which are really fun. I absolutely love the sequels. The third probably being my favorite of the three, but I do enjoy this one. And as it's, a gateway into the Onimusha series, it's fun. I would highly recommend either getting the PlayStation 4 version, or I would watch a Let's Play on YouTube. It is a lot of fun to watch. I have watched a couple Let's Plays because each person plays the game differently, and there are different routes you can go on. And there is one point which I've never been able to get to. There is something called the Realm of Souls, where you fight monster after monster, and you progress through this thing, and you're supposed to get this super weapon, I think, at the end. I could never get to the bottom of that freaking thing. It drove me nuts. I've never been able to get to accomplish that. Maybe playing the PlayStation 4 remaster, I'll eventually do it. But I've watched a few people play it. I've seen them get to the bottom, and I still don't know how they did it. But it's a fun game. It was a huge success. It went platinum in just under a month in the region, especially in Japan, with over 2 million copies worldwide, with 1 million being sold in Japan. It was a huge success. By July of 2006, the PlayStation 2 version had sold over 800,000 copies and earned 28 million in the United States. Next Generation ranked it as the 75th highest selling game launched for the PS2, Xbox, or GameCube between January 2000 and July 2006. The combined sales of the whole series reached 3 million units by July 2006. So a lot of the very first game was very highly successful. It gets a lot fairly positive reviews, about 35 out of 40 and 34 out of 40 for the Xbox version, 84% and for the PS2 version, and an 81% for the Xbox port. I believe the Xbox also has a different style of play, which I find interesting. I have never played it on Xbox, and I don't think I've seen a Let's Play on the Xbox version. But I highly recommend it, especially for like a retro gamer and you're looking for like a fun hack and slash game. I highly recommend Onimusha. It's worth playing, or at least watching a Let's Play of, because there's a lot of lore involved. The history behind it's really cool. Feudal Japan kind of, storyline, if you're into that stuff. I had a blast with it, killing the demons, the Genma, all kinds of stuff. I highly recommend Onimusha. I give it 4.5 Onis out of 5. Check it out. Onimusha Warlords. Okay, so originally I was just going to kind of brush by this series of events and just kind of go straight into what they were about. But then I really started thinking about it, and what ended up happening ended up being a strange event all in itself. So to give you some context, I usually record about an episode or two ahead of time. So this happened a couple weeks ago, but it kind of pointed me in a direction that I wasn't expecting it to. So a couple weekends ago, I was driving my friend John to an event in Flint where he was speaking at. And we were talking about the podcast, and he brought up the Wendigo. And I was like, yeah, it's funny. The Wendigo doesn't really get mentioned much at paranormal events and in the paranormal like conventions and stuff like that. And so anyways, and then we just started talking about other stuff and blah, 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 blah. Well, that was Friday night. We stayed the night. And then Saturday, the event started. We went and got breakfast, and there was a couple other friends of ours, Jim and Terry, there. And it took me a long time to realize, but my friend Jim was wearing a Wendigo shirt. I mean, literally on the name, it says Wendigo. And I looked at John, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, what the hell? And he just kind of laughed. He goes, yeah, I saw that earlier. I was like, oh, geez. I was like, okay. Well, that's interesting. And then, so a little bit, we finally get to the event, and I'm walking around, and there was an author there, and he was like telling me about some of his books, about what they're about. And there was one, he says, I believe it was called Whiteout. And he says, yeah, it's all about the Wendigo. So, okay, that's 3 times in less than 24 hours the Wendigo has been brought up. This is a very strange synchronistic series of events. So I'm like, wow, okay. So I kind of brush it off a little bit. And then, again, I'm walking around the convention a little bit later. Excuse me. And I go back to John's table, and I'm just sitting with him chatting. He goes, yeah. He goes, you don't ever believe. He says, he's talking to a couple people. He goes, so-and-so brought up the Wendigo. And I was like, that's 4 fucking times in less than 24 hours. I was like, okay, universe, obviously I either missed something in the last podcast, or you want me to delve more into it. So originally I was just going to kind of skim by all this weird synchronistic events and just go right to the Wendigo, but then I realized this weird series of events is paranormal in itself, and it needed its own topic for a minute. And I will delve more into the Wendigo legend and lore and myth and all that next weekend. We're going to really get into it. I found some really interesting stories and some stories from the Native American and indigenous peoples, and I thought it'd be interesting to share those with you. But fast forward to a weekend after that. Again, I'm driving my friend John to another event in Dundee, Michigan, and it was Friday. I'm at work, and no one at work really, I mean, there's 1 or 2 people that like horror stuff, but more movies than anything. And someone came up to me, and they were like, you ever hear of these Clive Barker books of blood? And I was like, okay, this is weird, because I was literally just listening to a podcast that mentioned that 5 minutes before that. And now this person who never talks about horror stuff just came up and asked me about the books of blood. I'm like, yeah, they're great. They're amazing. I love the books of blood. And he's like, oh, okay, my kid mentioned them. And I was like, what the hell are this? Blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, interesting. So we drive out Friday. We stay the night. Saturday's the event. And John, and I hadn't mentioned anything about the books of blood or anything. And John and another friend of ours, Tim, were talking about the books of blood. I just happened to walk by, and I hear it brought up. I'm like, what the fuck? This is 3 times. What's going on? Well, the idea I've been kind of playing around and throwing around in my mind is reading some of my favorite stories from the books of blood on the podcast. Kind of narrating it, maybe doing, well, if I could, some voices and dramatic acting onto it, maybe kind of giving it a fun narration and stuff. But it's weird. These last few weekends, I've been having these strange series of synchronistic events. And the more and more I think about it, I'm like, okay, universe, you're throwing a lot at me here. And I'm trying to decipher it all. I just wonder if maybe I'm on the right track with this podcast. Maybe this is something I'm meant to be doing, something I'm supposed to be doing. And so I'm going to continue. I will admit I was getting a little discouraged myself, but That's just because I always doubt everything I do, and I know I shouldn't. But I'm going to stick with this. I'm hoping that as it goes on, each episode gets better and better. I know in the beginning it's kind of rough. I've realized that myself, but I feel like it's starting to kind of fall into place of how I want this podcast to go, and I feel like the universe is pushing me in that direction, that like I really should keep with this and keep doing this. So I'm going to, but I'm gonna keep you all updated, especially with with all the strange synchronistic events and everything that have been going on. With the Books of Blood and the Wendigo, and there's been a couple other things that I'm really not ready to release yet. Those will be future episodes, but I will be updating you on those very soon. But what I did want to tell you is in preparation for next week's episode, we're going to be talking about the children. And it's kind of hard to find. I'm going to be putting up a link on my Twitter account at Chris_Jimenez, Jimines, which you can find the children at if you want to watch it before we talk about it on the podcast. It's a very strange film. It's a very over-the-top, takes itself way too seriously, schlocky horror movie. I find it fun and hilarious. There's literally points where some of the children actors are literally laughing as they're going through their scenes, and I love this film. I find it hilarious. I find it just over the top and enjoyable, and it is such a strange film, but I highly I recommend you check it out before we talk about it. And again, I will put that up in a link in my Twitter account if you're interested in watching that before we talk about it. But again, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. I look forward to making more and more of these podcasts. I'm having a pretty fun time doing them and discovering movies I haven't watched in a long time that I really want to talk about. So thank you all for listening, and I absolutely hope you have a wonderful week.